Hello there everybody, What Culture's Adam Clery here, and really, honestly, truly, when the credits rolled on Star Trek Nemesis, did you think it would be that long until we saw this crew again? I mean, I personally did think we'd see the Next Generation again, but I thought like a bad reboot in 30 years or something where you like shave Timothy Chalamet's head or so, I don't know. But no, not the case, because last night on CBS we got the very first episode of Star Trek Picard, and I'm just going to break character here for a second to say that 8, 9, 10-year-old massive Star Trek nerd me, if you'd sat him down and told him in 2020 you're going to be presenting your own show about Star Trek, he would have wet his pants. But yes, back to the show, and Patrick Stewart returns to the role that made him a household name. He returns to the role of Captain Picard, but no longer a Starfleet captain, not even a Star Trek admiral. He has retired to Chateau Picard, and the universe has just moved on without him. We know he's going to be joined by familiar faces, we know he's going to be joined by new faces, and embark upon one last adventure, although Asterix is not one last adventure because it's already been renewed for season 2, but we know he has one last job that needs to be done. But can the show live up to this understandable hype? Well, last night I watched it, I got in bed, cup of tea, Earl Grey hot, and watched it, and I am very pleased to tell you that, well, you'll see. So, right, let's get on with it then. My name is Adam Clery. I honestly cannot believe I get to present my own show about Star Trek, and these are all the ups and downs for episode 1, Remembrance. You only get one shot at a first impression with a television show, and, well, was there any single fan who watched that opening 60 seconds and did anything other but quietly make this noise? Oh, space, the final frontier, a gorgeously rendered, colourful nebula, the Enterprise D, brought to us in glorious VFX, blue skies playing gently in the background. They couldn't have done it any more perfect than this for me, genuinely. This was just, mwah, up. And from there we zip into 10 forward, where Picard and Data are playing a game of cards. Again, genius, because long-term fans of The Next Generation will remember that that show went off the air to Data literally dealing a deck of cards out to Picard. This is just absolutely perfect, picking up where we left off filmmaking. And honestly, right, I could have watched an entire 45-minute episode of just this scene. Yes, I know it was a dream and we jumped back to Earth and all that, but just such a reassuring, perfectly written, lovely moment between two of the series' most iconic characters. It felt like the show and both of these men had never been away, despite the fact it's like 1994 for The Next Generation and 2003 for the pair of them, respectively. I just loved it. And while we're on the subject of the filmmaking, and this won't be universally popular, I suspect, you can definitely feel the hand of the Abrams verse in the way this is put together. Now, some people are disappointed by that because they kind of wanted it to feel like The Next Generation, which was a 90s TV series, for crying out loud, and not Star Trek 90210, but guys, it's 2020. TV is now made with a cinematic bent in mind. It's not filmed like a soap opera the way it used to be, and I think they've done this right. Shouldn't really come as a surprise either that Alex Kurtzman, who was one of the men behind Star Trek 2009, is co-creating this, but just the feel of it and the look of it and the kind of framing of the shots and the rotating angles and the occasional lens flare all comes from Abrams Filmmaking 101, which gives it a sense of importance that TV shows back then didn't tend to have. It gives it a flavour, a cinematic flavour that we've not really seen in Star Trek before, but crucially, they haven't gone over the top with it. Like that one shot where Mars is exploding and we kind of zoom in on Picard like that. That's classic cinema as opposed to classic television, and I just really like the way they've shot this. It feels big up. So what about this world they have created for us then? Well, if there's one thing that every major franchise that successfully navigated the turn of the millennium has done, it's gone dark. Now, I think this all pretty much started with Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. He took a superhero who was sort of famous for tights and then having rubber nipples and made it one of the most grounded, gritty movies, one of the most successful and critically praised comic book films of all time. And then every single person in Hollywood went, oh, we should do that. And if you don't believe me there, the Transformers even now use a muted colour palette and make grand sweeping statements about the human cost of intergalactic warfare. It's a trend. And Picard's entire premise centers around the 900 million displaced Romulans following the supernova that was hinted at in Star Trek 2009, as well as 92,000 people who were killed when rogue synths destroyed Mars. Now, parallels have already been drawn in both these cases to both the 9/11 terror attacks and Hurricane Katrina, and while that is a bit on the nose, it's also not that on the nose. The show is definitely trying to paint this picture of a deeply damaged, fractured, suspicious, and cynical universe, which is miles removed from the utopian Federation we used to get in the TV series. And it's going to be tricky to navigate, especially as you're taking Picard away from Starfleet to do it, but if they do it right, and they do it as well as they've done it in this episode, it's definitely going to be a positive. I am giving the tone an up. But as I say, this is not a particularly original idea. Almost everything has tried to go dark in the last 10 or 15 years, and as a result, the show and the episode has come in for quite a bit of criticism from many reviewers for basically trotting some well-wooden boards. Well wooden? Well worn. Entertainment Weekly went in really hard on all the cliches. Like, you've got the premonition dream shoehorning in a dead character. You've got a normal person getting the Jason Bourne treatment. Whoa, where did they learn all the crazy martial arts moves? You've got the Hermit retiring for one last job. You've got Daj apparently being Palpatine's granddaughter or something along those lines. And you've also got the mad as hell televised introduction speech, which Aaron Sorkin literally did twice. Now, I don't personally think there's anything too wrong with any of these because, I mean, after all, these boards are so well trodden because they are good boards to tread, but sci-fi shows are supposed to push boundaries in terms of both the storytelling and the filmmaking, and thus far, Star Trek Picard hasn't yet. Might not be a problem going forward, but it definitely was a problem for this episode, and it gets the down. Now, one area I genuinely expected the show to slip up on was how it handled the nostalgia factor, because too much of it and you end up looking like a one-off web special, and too little of it and people are like, why the hell am I tuning into this Star Trek show? It doesn't even feel like Star Trek. But they opened with that shot of the Enterprise D, which I thought was absolutely perfectly handled. The way they've used data feels brief and important and not at all gratuitous, but the real masterstroke, the absolute masterstroke, was taking all the nostalgia they wanted to have in the show and literally putting it in a vault for you. You could go and tour it like a museum. Yes, that bit where Picard goes back to Starfleet HQ and he goes in the Picard vault, and it's just got, like, it's got the Enterprise E in there, it's got the Captain's Yacht in there, it's got the Picard Day banner in there, it's got a bat'leth, it's got those paintings, it's just got everything that they could have just spread across the entire episode and been like, hey, look, hey, remember that, which would have ruined the storytelling. They've just put it in one place, and you can now screen grab it and pour over it to your heart's content. They have knocked that out the park. And then there was the far more subtle stuff on top of that. You had the Daystrom Institute, Utopia Planitia, Earl Grey tea, It Never Fails. There was loads of things in there to just reward proper big bad nerd long-term fans like me without shoving it in your face. Yeah, that gets an up as well. And directly linked to that, but another point entirely, Star Trek has now finally, after all these years, mastered another level of this stuff: the treasure hunting, Easter egg, fanbait element. Now, yes, Star Trek Discovery was quite divisive, but I think we can safely say one of the things it absolutely nailed was the Easter eggs and stuff like that. You had frequent references to forthcoming Star Trek stories, and little nods and winks to long-running Trek tropes. You even had little things hidden in the background like a bottle of wine from Chateau Picard. They did that perfectly. And between those sweeping shots of Earth and that aforementioned vault of Star Trek wonderment, there's just so much stuff you can go delving into to find tiny little references to great things in Star Trek. Like the Ferengi are in there. You missed them, but they're in there. Shakespeare gets a reference. Spock gets a reference. There's loads of stuff if you go and look for it. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, conveniently, we already have that article on whatculture.com. Go and check it out. Now, yes, long-term viewers of Ups and Downs on this channel may note that I'm playing with the format ever so slightly. Like when I did the Game of Thrones one, we went through the episode storyline bit by bit and examined how that all worked. But because this is the first episode of Picard, it doesn't really make sense to pull the storyline apart because there's so many more elements that are brand new to us. But I will talk about the story as one point. Now, Star Trek The Next Generation left us with so many delicious dangling threads. Like, it never bothered trying to wrap things up when it went off the air. It just left us in that universe with all this other stuff still to be explored, and so much so, in fact, that it managed to inform a series of feature motion pictures and 2 entire other series, like DS9 and Voyager, both pick up storylines that started in the Next Generation. And we just knew, didn't we? We knew there was going to be far more to connect Picard to the Next Generation than merely just where it left off in Nemesis, or the scant little hints we've had in the plot synopsis or those short trailers. And, my friends, enter a mention of Commander Bruce Maddox. Now, if you have not seen 1989's Next Generation episode Measure of a Man, go and watch it immediately after this video. The premise is Starfleet argues that they can do whatever they want with Data. He is not a person, he does not have rights, he is a machine, he is a tool, he is their property, and they want to pull him apart and see what makes him tick. But thanks to Picard, Riker, and some wonderful writing, I might add, they successfully argue that he has the rights of a person and the rights to exist. And lo and behold, would you look at that? Synths attack Mars, and synths are now banned. Ergo, everything brought up in this episode can now inform this entire series. And I am delighted they have directly brought back Maddox for this series, even if in name mention only, because he was one of the best characters that only got 1 episode in the history of Star Trek. This is just brilliant. And it ties in with the Borg, it ties in with the Romulans, it ties in with Data. It's just the perfect way to bring this all together, and purely from a story perspective, say what you want about anything else, purely from a story perspective, this is absolute manna from heaven. Up, 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 up. And just in case you do want a little recap of the story, Maddox was apparently very busy during the events of the rest of the Next Generation, and at all the time that's passed since, he still was Starfleet's head of robotics, and Picard suspects he may have successfully created 2 twin flesh and blood androids from one of Data's positronic neuron cells or something like that, but he has disappeared since the attack on Mars. Oh my god, I can't wait to see where this goes. And if you've not seen the episode yet and you think, my god, he's just rushed through that very quickly, then I have some terrible, terrible news for you, because the first episode of Star Trek Picard rushes through absolutely everything. It rushes through an entire series worth of exposition, of plot, of storytelling, of background in 45 minutes. It races through. Ostensibly, this episode is less the start of Star Trek Picard as it is, here is everything you need to know if you want to watch Star Trek Picard. I mean, the actual show looks like being the story of a ragtag crew who come together to fight shadowy political forces, stage a heist mission, and battle their own demons in the process. But Remembrance is effectively just the story of one man getting off the couch. Like, I have completely simplified that, but it kind of all does lead to him getting off the couch and going, right, okay, I guess I gotta sort this out then. But in order to get us to that moment off the sofa, it has to show us entirely what the universe looks like, post-Supernova, what society looks like, post-Synths, what Starfleet looks like, post-Picard, what Picard looks like, post-Starfleet. It has to introduce Dahj and then Exploder in your face again. It has, honestly, 4 or 5 episodes worth of stuff just in this episode. And at times you're just like, sorry, can we just slow down a second? Like, I know they did that little short primer about the synth attack, but that needed a whole episode itself just to explain and to show and to kind of give you the context of, but you just get like a little brief mention in an interview with a couple of news clips here and there, and he mentions it once or twice, and it's just, if the rest of the series is like this, I will redevelop asthma just trying to watch it. But in the here and now, in this one episode, it was just, the pacing was very bad. The pacing was all over the place. I'm giving the pacing a down. Oh my god, imagine giving the pacing a down when you ramble on as much as Adam Clery does. Don't even bother. And speaking of not letting the audience catch up, I have to say this. Can you imagine watching this and not being a massive Star Trek fan? Like, the show tries to cram so much in, it doesn't bother stopping to explain what a Starfleet is, or why a robot would want to paint, or why in the hell you'd ever call a dog number 1. We know the answers to all of those questions. We even know that's not even how you'd ask them. But imagine, right, if you didn't know the answer to any of those questions. Imagine if you hadn't seen Nemesis, or you didn't pay too much attention to Spock's one scene of exposition in 2009. Or imagine you preferred Voyager, or you'd not given any of this a second thought since it went off the air. Imagine trying to watch this episode without knowing exactly what was going on ahead of time. And the thing is, right, a chunk of Star Trek fans, and I mean a big old chunk, of Star Trek fans are of the casual variety. They will know who Picard is, they will know who Data is, they will know what Starfleet is, but everything else in that episode that you were expected to know, they'll have just been like, wait, sorry, no, what, who? Now, yes, this is not the end of the world because The Witcher has just proved on Netflix that you can get away with doing high-concept, lore-heavy adventures without holding people's hands all the way through it, provided, of course, that your storylines and your characters are engrossing enough to get away with it. But the success of Star Trek Picard does not depend on bad nerds like me and you who will just watch it anyway. It depends on its ability to appeal to a more normal audience. And purely in terms of accessibility this week, it did not, and I must give that a down. But never mind all of that, right? Because bad nerds like me and you are great, and we deserve to enjoy this show, and enjoy it we did, and I'm gonna end on an up, and what better up to end on than Patrick Stewart. Look, it goes without saying that The Next Generation would have been nothing without him, and without The Next Generation we wouldn't have got the subsequent 15 years of Star Trek on television, but still, basing an entire Star Trek series around one character, when the greatest thing about it has always been the developing relationships across the entire crew, still felt like a bit of a risk. Like, think about what made The Next Generation great, right? Geordi's relationship with Data, Data's relationship with Picard, Picard's relationship with Worf, Worf's relationship with Troy, Troy's relationship with Riker, on and on and on and on and on it goes. It was never about one person. But about 15 minutes into this episode, right, during that interview with that particularly pushy reporter, the performance he gives and how easily he's back into the character. The man, even at 79 years of age, has not lost a single shred of the fire he brought to this role. He is its greatest strength. He is why we will tune in every week. He is a living up. So there you have it. Those are all the ups and downs for the very first episode of Star Trek Picard, Remembrance. Yes, I know, I still can't believe they haven't bought me a uniform. Let me know what you made of it all in the comments below. Of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for watching. I honestly meant that I cannot believe I get to do a Star Trek show. You have no idea how bad I was for this stuff when I was 10, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.